Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Patterson. I chose the topic of entropy because it's something I find fascinating and connects so many things. Anyone got any ideas about what entropy is already? What? Nothing.
It's something to do with energy.
It's something to do with energy, and something to do
like happens go from ordered into chaos.
ordered into chaotic. You do something else? Same thing. That's exactly right. So there's in the laws of thermodynamics, first law of thermodynamics, anyone come across that? It's basically the conservation of energy. Okay, so energy can't be created or destroyed. But there's a difference in types of energy. Some are much more usable than others, and some you can't do an awful lot with. And although energy is always conserved, that quality of the energy changes depending on this term entropy. And the second law of thermodynamics is that entropy is always going to increase. It's a measure of disorder, and things are basically breaking down and getting more and more disordered with time. There's a number of different ways to describe that. I'll give an example of that. Here's a picture of some smoke. Time 1 by spray some air freshener. There's all the atoms, the molecules of the air freshener will start off roughly around here. What's going to happen to them with time? Spread out. But if you look at what's happening to molecules, they're undergoing elastic collisions that are effectively reversible. So why are they spreading out? What is happening to the particles as they get from here to the rest of the room? Yeah?
They're just moving from high concentration to low concentration.
It is moving from a high concentration to a low concentration, but we're trying to get at why things move from a high concentration to a low concentration.
The atoms just random movements.
Random movements, okay? So it's basically a statistical effect. You've got all these particles that are moving randomly, and some will have walks, random walks, and eventually they'll get out to the room. You know, smell air freshener again? Yeah. So eventually it fills the whole room, and it's very improbable, although it's possible, that all those air freshener particles would all wander back and collect in one part of the room. But it doesn't happen. And it's because of this law of decreasing order. So we start with something ordered, like the particles in the corner of the room, and it gets more and more disordered as the random walk takes it to fill the whole room. And basically we've got an explanation of why things happen. So it's and this is it's actually a very deep reason when you look at it, because it applies to absolutely everything. It's a law of physics that when you take it to look at the evolution of the universe or of life, it's part of the explanation of why things actually happen. So it's not just energy can't be created or destroyed. You've got this arrow of time. Things are getting more and more disorganized with time. Okay. So we're going to have a look about what's actually happening in the information that's in. There's information there. In this case, it's the information that Chief's laptops were getting in the smoke group. Okay. I'm going to describe in a different way describing entropy. If you've got an arrangement of things that are unknown. So you've got your ace in this pack of 8 cards. There's in this case, there's 3 bits of information that will take you to the place of that card in the pack. Okay, so first bit of information will tell you if it's in that side or that side. Next bit, whether it's magic trick, which side is the card. So just 3 bits of information, or 3 choices. You get up to 8 alternatives. When this is unknown, the number of alternatives gives you a measure of how unlikely it is to be in that place. Am I making sense? Okay, so your entropy is related to the number of possible places where your particle or your card could be, but it isn't. So one way to describe measure of disorder in the system is by counting the number of states that you could possibly be in, and each is equally likely, that gives you a measure of entropy. So for the aerosol, if we have, imagine little cells everywhere in the room, there's a certain probability for that to contain a molecule of air freshener. Okay. Now, of all the possible different combinations you could have of air freshener molecules in the room, some are all concentrated over here, some there's a big letter P stuck in the middle of the room, described with A molecules. But for an overwhelming majority of them, they are spread equally to the rim. So each one arrangement, if you give it an infinite amount of time, it would actually fulfill that arrangement just through random walks. But because there's an overwhelmingly greater number where it's just spread through the room, and that's what you're likely to expect. You expect to have a look at the macroscopic situation and see something that is like most of the statistical grouping. Okay, so entropy is a way of putting a number on all those possible configurations. Basically gives us a way of describing all the information that we don't know about the molecules, but we can describe. And this possible arrangements also applies to energy. So for every arrangement also includes the amount of energy each has. I've got a demo to kind of give an illustration of that. A couple of volunteers. I've got a molecule here. I want to see any volunteers? Okay. The trick of this is I've got a ball full of bouncy balls, okay? And I want to see how many balls Ed can get to come out of the bucket by throwing the ball in. Any guesses at how? What's it?
0, or just that, the one ball.
The one, you think you might just be able to get the one out?
Yeah.
But
what if you bounce it, right?
okay, let's
just
throw it in as hard as you can, straight down.
Right.
Okay, get one out. And also, here we go, Luke. But if you hit the bucket, that's what happens. If you hit the balls. Okay. Okay, so what is happening here?
there's an expected probability that one only one's going to come out. So surely,
So the amount of energy is, where's the energy going? Yeah.
Well, it's going from the ball to the balls in the bucket. Yeah.
So all the balls, yeah.
Yeah, and then it vibrates and then back to that ball.
It could do, but it doesn't bounce very high. If you hit the edge of the bucket, it'll hit the roof, as I demonstrated. But the energy in the ball, because it's being shared with all the other balls, there isn't that much left to get them out of the bucket. And it's more likely that the energy gets split down and is shared than all comes back together into one ball. Okay, so we can put enough energy to get one ball to break a fan, but because it's being shared, it hardly gets out of the bucket. Okay. Now the person that was most influential in looking at this and using it to describe temperature and thinking about a particle description of the world is this fellow here. This is Boltzmann. He's actually got, this is the description of entropy. Entropy is equal to the Boltzmann constant times the log of the number of possible states. Okay, so it relates this measure of disorder to the number of possible states, and in doing so, it also relates this value of the Boltzmann constant also gives you a relationship between the internal energy and the temperature. He's quite an interesting man. I think he was bipolar. He wasn't diagnosed bipolar, but he was trying to convince everyone that the particle description of the world wasn't just a mathematical tool, but things actually were made of particles. And he got a lot of philosophical objections because no one had seen any particles, and no one had. It was a useful concept, but it was a philosophical concept. So when Ned was like, he actually got into philosophy. He gave lectures on philosophy. He was learning philosophy, but he got so depressed and he looked at I don't think particularly stable to start with. He actually committed suicide. But he had a good period. Okay, so this is as I mentioned this before. So entropy is defined as a measure of disorder. Okay, and we define it proportional to the log of the microstates corresponding to the observed macrostate. Okay, so the corresponding microstate for the aerosol in the room is you can smell it everywhere, but the number of possible microstates for that to be evenly spread all over the room is huge, and there's only a few with it concentrated in one area. Okay, so for this arrangement, it's high order, and then when it's spread out, you've got a much higher entropy. And second law, thermodynamics says entropy always increases. That's right. Okay. So the question to why there is a thermodynamic arrow of time in the present universe, and that answer is very simple. Because the present entropy of the universe is very low. What was I saying? Yeah, it's very low compared to how it could be. Okay, so things evolve in time because we're in a low entropy state. Otherwise, everything would stay the same, it would just stay in thermal equilibrium. But because we're out of equilibrium, we see now in time. So the universe evolves towards what is ultimately a much more probable state of events, and an improbable. So if we observe something in a state of low entropy, very highly ordered, it's inevitable that if we observe that later, it's much more likely to be understood. And the probability of observing it to evolve into a state of lower entropy is vanishingly small, just like aerosol going back into the bottom. It's just not going to happen. Okay. We've got a bit of explaining to do though when we look around the world. In history, some things seem to get more ordered, okay, more complex. So this is a number of different cell types over millions of years before present. There seems to be order happening, but not in apparent defiance of the second law of thermodynamics. But if we look at what thermodynamics is telling us, the reason that we see order now is because in the past, just from the second law of thermodynamics, the order is always decreasing. The order is always decreasing yet, and disorder is always increasing. We see order now, that means in the past it was more order. That's right. So thermodynamics tells us that in the past entropy was even lower than it was now. Because entropy has been increasing with time. So we're not even close to a maximum state of entropy, but in the past we were much, much closer to maximum order. Okay? If you go further back, then you would expect to see more and more order. Now, there's other ideas about where order comes from, and this physicist mused a lot about them. Anyone know who this one is? He's the other founding father of statistical physics. He's got the other part of the name of the Boltzmann something equation.
Is that
No, you heard of Maxwell? Yeah. So he was a Scottish theoretical physicist, apparently a bit quirky. He memorized poems and wrote his own. He used to play the guitar and sing "Coming Through the Rye" by Robert Burns, which starts, "Can a body meet a body flying through the air? Can a body hit a body, will it fly anywhere?" And interesting, he was also a Christian. So he is approaching things from a very different angle to Boltzmann. Okay. And he came up with this conundrum, this puzzler. So he said, if we conceive of a being whose faculties are so sharpened that he can follow every molecule in its course, such a being whose attributes are as essentially finite as our own, be able to do what is impossible to us. For we have seen that molecules in a vessel full of air, uniform temperature, are moving with velocities by no means uniform, with the mean velocity of a great number of them arbitrarily selected is almost exactly uniform. So now let us suppose that such a vessel is divided into two portions, A and B, by division in which there is a small hole, and that being concealed, all the individual molecules opens and closes the hole, so as to allow only the swifter molecules to pass from A to B, and only the slower molecules to pass from B to A. We will thus, without the expenditure of work, raise the temperature of B and lower that of A, in contradiction to the second law of thermodynamics. Now, this problem actually waited 50 years before it was given a good solution. So, here's Maxwell's theorem, letting fast ones through. Now, it apparently violates this apparently universal law of thermodynamics that disorder will always increase and order will always go down, because this demon seems to have managed to collect all the hot particles on one side and the cold particles on the other, which are then available to do work in Fisher's steam engine. But the solution actually is that every time he does this, there's an increase in information that basically whatever way you can possibly construct that, the entropy of the process itself increases more than the increase of entropy. So effectively you could get a micro pump for order, but it's at the expense of order in the universe at large. In fact, molecules that make life are essentially working like this. They use energy. They get ordered energy from the sun, ultimately, or from chemical foods. And that free energy, that much more ordered energy, they channel to do chemical processes and create ordered things. And the output then is the increasing disorder elsewhere in the universe. Okay? So it was eventually proved that the whole system still increases in disorder, but locally you can have order being generated or created by these pumps. And the interesting connection was made between information and information processing and entropy. It takes work to create ordered information. I don't know how much energy you use when you click on a search on Google. On average, it's about 7 grams of carbon for the average Google search. And when you do a search, maybe you're a couple of minutes looking through the results, and on average, you've got all these hundreds of servers all over the world checking data banks. On average, 7 grams of carbon. And anything that gets ordered needs that increasing in order, ultimately output of heat. And the Earth is a big, it's got a big input of ordered energy from the sun, and then plants process that. Obviously, they use that energy to build free energy into the plant structures that animals can use. And so we've got a situation where, okay, when we look at the Earth, we can explain the very ordered things that we see because we've got a very ordered energy input. But then, running that back, you've got to ask, where does that come from? Okay, so where does everything going to come from? Where does everything physically come from if you take it out of the
Big Bang.
Big Bang.
Big Bang. So, I'm going to talk about our concept of what the Big Bang is like. Okay, most people's concept of Big Bang is disorder. Yeah, an explosion, sort of random bits.
Most of it.
Exactly. Read this very interesting paper I've got. I've got a set up a website with a few extra bits on it. It's just swp.pdworks.com. There's this paper on physical limits to computation that read it gave me a really useful way in to think about the order in the Big Bang. I know, heard of Moore's Law? If you look in time at the power of a computer processor, it's been doubling every 18 to 24 months. Yeah? So, start off with computers spinning around, not doing many processes, end up with more and more dense processing power, so smaller and smaller bits of matter doing more and more processes. This paper looks at not just the past and present and then future of processing, but what are the ultimate physical limits. So this is some projections of where $1,000 of processing power could get you in the next 20, 30 years or so. Eventually we'll all be able to upload ourselves to our laptops. From this paper, he does the thermodynamics of information processing. Okay, what does the perfect information processing lump of matter look like? And that's himself to 1 kilogram, 1 liter, and ask the question, what are the fundamental limits of how much information this lump of matter can process? There's your ultimate laptop. And he goes through the process, the limits of what matter can do, and comes to a description that is incredibly like what we would describe as the Big Bang. So you've got incredibly dense and hot bit of material, but it's near zero entropy, almost maximum order, and it's processing that energy. It's through the expansion of the universe. It's evolving to produce hydrogen, helium, produce stars, produce galaxies, and ultimately, what's happening? What?
That's why you need those with laptops.
Yeah. Let me see if I can get this. What's this? You can do all your work.
Unless you wanted to do like what you
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so this comes from simulations of the Big Bang, and it's done as looking at the co-moving running, so that it doesn't show the expansion, but it shows what happens to the material. It starts incredibly even, you get fluctuations come in, and it's going down, obviously, all the time. And it's very cold, and you don't see any increase in temperature until you've got the gravitational collapse creating stars. And this is the key to where we get order from. Although the Big Bang, you imagine it as being disordered. When you look at gravity, this changes things. And if you have a whole bunch of particles that are attracting each other on long distance scales gravitationally, what's the most probable configuration? Everything's attracting everything else. Everything's going to come together. Okay? So when you bring the force of gravity in, something very smooth and spread out is very improbable, because everything wants to be concentrated ultimately in black holes. And the biggest source of entropy in the universe is actually supermassive black holes in the center of galaxies. So you've got the start with incredibly smooth, ordered material, and then it contracts into these points of these black holes, these ultimate points of disorder, chaos, and it's that hump that basically means that the whole universe is not in thermodynamic equilibrium, and we get some that powers us up the ratchets to life again. So we heard of Richard Dawkins' micro improbable. He describes so evolution can get you up. Micro improbable is this mountain of improbability, and we're kind of sitting on the top. But if you don't take one jump, but take lots of little steps, you can get a good explanation of where we are. Have you come across that argument? It's got a book called Mountain Trouble, basically an argument for evolution being a good explanation. But when we look at the Big Bang, the amount of order and improbability, if you like, starts off here, moves down, and the amount of improbable is just a little flip down here. The real mystery is what physicists call the flatness problem. And there's a number of possible ideas to account for that. We've heard of many worlds theory, or inflationary theory, or God. But basically, when we get into this problem, this is the one that we don't have an answer for at the minute. I remember being in a particle physics lesson, and he was drawing sort of higher and higher energies of particles, and he's relating it to particle detectors and where it got us to back in the Big Bang, and kept on going. So this is the highest energy, and then highest energy possible, and then he drew lines of beyond here is theology. But it is a bit, it leaves us at a bit of a loose end, because physics hasn't got an answer for that yet. So for those of you going on, I reckon this is one of the most interesting questions to kind of contribute to. Any questions or anything?
Is that, so you talk about our theories, what's sort of most probable in your mind?
Most probable.
So it's hard
You've got to the heart of the problem, actually, because I think probability breaks down at this point, because you've got probability deals with an ensemble of situations. Okay, so if you have 8 cards, which is mostly probable, the real problem is we don't know how to get a sample of an infinite other number of universes so we can do an experiment. So it's a metaphysical problem that people decide on the basis of aesthetics or religion. I think scientifically you have to be agnostic about in all these different theories and explore them for their mathematical beauty or their but I think if you get caught by the belief of the theory when it isn't connected to, I mean, a lot of people do, like David Deutsch believes in multiple universes with all his heart, and
are they doing any experiments at the LHC to sort of look back into that area, or is there nothing they can do?
well, LHC at best will get us, to early moments of what's happening with Big Bang, but in taking it back to the zero entropy point, there's your equations break down, your time starts, you've got very few theoretical ways beyond that and no practical ways beyond it. So my advice is to explore as many different viewpoints as possible and enjoy them for what they are. But ultimately we are limited and science isn't going anywhere tonight. I think to leave with a bit of mystery is good. That's what motivates discovery. I think it's what draws me into science. Any other suggestions? Any other questions?